If one Nintendo lawsuit wasn't enough for you, then boy do I have some good news for you. This is actually an old story that came up a few weeks ago, but I never got the chance to talk about it, so that's what I want to do today. It would seem there was somebody out there streaming themselves playing Nintendo games before their release date. Now, before I criticize Nintendo, and don't worry, that's coming, I just want to point out that this is a really stupid thing to do if you're a game streamer. I think it's one thing to stream yourself emulating old video games that are maybe hard to come across or games you've personally bought several times over the years, but I think it's an entirely different thing to emulate games even before they're released. When it comes to older games, it's harder for these big companies to argue that it's actually hurting their bottom line when, according to the Video Game History Foundation, a whopping 87% of classic video games that were released before 2010 are not legally available to be purchased anywhere anymore. Think about that for just a minute. 87% of all video games are considered lost media because you can't buy them anywhere anymore. Or all the old hardware that some of these games were specifically made to run on no longer exists. That's a whole lot different than just emulating a video game to get around having to buy it on a console that's still very much alive. And this lawsuit against the streamer actually alleges that the streamer emailed Nintendo directly and told them that they had plenty of burner accounts that they could just keep streaming from, even if they had shut their main ones down. Now, assuming this is true, it has to be one of the dumbest things any video game streamer has ever done. Daring Nintendo to sue you for emulating a game ahead of its release date, in the middle of Nintendo also suing Pocket Pair for alleged copyright violation of their Pal World game, is like walking up to a grizzly bear that has just mauled a deer in the woods and kicking it directly in the nose.
Hey, check it out, man. There's a bear coming. Hey, buddy.
I'm not so much bothered by this streamer downloading games ahead of their release dates, as I am what Nintendo is going to do with this situation. This just reminds me of the situation with the Yuzu emulator where some of the features were placed behind a paywall and screenshots of unreleased games were used to showcase what the emulator was capable of. And it was the Yuzu situation where we saw Nintendo swap strategies on how they plan to make emulation illegal by arguing that it's not necessarily piracy, but a violation of their copyright. This streamer now finds themselves in a very similar situation to the Yuzu devs, with Nintendo looking to take $7.5 million from them in this lawsuit. Alright, so we've established that it was wrong of this streamer to use emulation to get around paying for a brand new released video game. Now let's talk about how ridiculous this lawsuit is from Nintendo. Nintendo wants $150,000 for every time this person played a video game ahead of its release date, and on top of that, $2,500 for every time this person promoted an emulator or told people which sites to go to find the ROMs. Now you have to remember that one of the things that was key to the takedown of Yuzu was the fact that they were using Tears of the Kingdom footage to promote it. Just before its release, Tears of the Kingdom found its way into the wild of the internet and it was downloaded over 1 million times illegally, and Nintendo used that to argue that Yuzu was facilitating piracy. The problem is, despite those 1 million illegal downloads, Tears of the Kingdom went on to become one of the Switch's best-selling games and even provided a slight bump in sales of the Switch itself during the time in which that game was new. It was breaking sales records at the time, so to argue that that game being illegally downloaded even 1 million times put any dent in its profitability is just ridiculous. And it's not like Nintendo is hurting for money, according to this article from NintendoLife.com. This article, written by Ollie Reynolds, says that the economics magazine Toyo Keizai reported that Nintendo was the richest company in Japan at the time. Not even a year ago, Nintendo's cash and cash equivalent value was somewhere around $11.44 billion. And that's not even all of it. You know how much debt value Nintendo had at the time? None. This company has said that they want Mario to be the new Mickey Mouse. And if there's anything we know about Mickey Mouse and copyright laws, this will not end well. Disney constantly got the copyright laws changed in their favor so they wouldn't have to give up rights to Mickey Mouse's earliest incarnations, and it took 95 years before Steamboat Willie was officially in the public domain. If that same standard were applied to the arcade version of Donkey Kong that came out in 1981, it would be 2076 before that game went into the public domain and became freeware. That is, of course, assuming that video games will get the same kind of treatment that other forms of media get that have copyright protection. Because as it currently stands, you are legally allowed to rip music from CDs or TV shows from DVDs and Blu-rays and play them on whichever device you have that you want to play them on. But Nintendo believes that this standard should not be applied to video games. Now, the reason why this topic always just gets me so frustrated is because I love Nintendo's video games. And Nintendo acts like if you support emulation, you're supporting piracy, or you don't want to buy video games that you like, and that's just not true. I bought the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Cowabunga collection because I played exactly 2 of the Turtle games when I was a kid, and I wanted to have an official means to play those games again today. I love the Marvel vs. Capcom series, which is why I bought that Arcade 1-Up cabinet at the time where it was the only way to officially buy that game. And guess what? When the MVC Fighting Collection released, I picked that up too. Spyro the Dragon wasn't a Nintendo series, but I loved it so much when I played it on the PS1, I had to get it for the Switch when they released the remakes there. I've even bought some old PS2 Final Fantasy games for this console. And we can't forget about this, the thing that they pulled from their very own eShop. Or how about when they dusted off Super Mario RPG and it got everybody super excited to play this game again in a modern format? I mean, we could also talk about how much I was a big fan of the 3DS, and when they released Dragon Quest VIII on it, I had to pick it up even though I had already beaten that game on the PlayStation 2 years ago. This next one might cost me some cool points, but yep. I actually liked the Wii U, and it had a lot of really good games on it, like the hit Super Mario Maker, a game so good that I decided to go buy it for the 3DS too. Not to mention the Wii U was the birthplace of Hyrule Warriors, which was a really fun take on the Legend of Zelda series, and while I didn't go for the 3DS version of this game, I did eventually opt in for the definitive edition on the Switch. Now, I will admit that when I played New Super Mario Bros. Wii on this channel, I was emulating it because I didn't know where my copy of the game was. But in a different run, for No More Heroes, I actually picked up a used copy from GameStop to play that game. My run of Ed, Edd n Eddy The Misadventures was also done through emulation, but this was actually years after I tracked down a physical copy of the game through Amazon. And to throw in one more for good measure, I'm currently subscribed to Nintendo Switch Online and its expansion pack, which means I have a whole set of libraries of different old games I can play on top of owning both of Nintendo's many console releases. The reason I showed you guys all that stuff is because I firmly believe that most gamers buy the vast majority of their video games in some form or another. The video game industry is one of the biggest industries in the entire world of entertainment, and it was the only industry during the COVID pandemic that actually saw growth. In fact, the industry grew so large that video game companies started hiring a ton of people. But it turns out they only hired those people because they expected the industry to just keep growing beyond the pandemic, and when that didn't happen, a whole lot of people lost their jobs. Of course, though, none of the CEOs or any of those guys lost their jobs or lost any pay when everyone else did. Those guys are still doing just fine. But the important part here is to understand what Nintendo is trying to do. They know they can't win on just the piracy angle, so they've swapped it up to going after them for copyright. Nintendo knows that this streamer does not have $7.5 million to give them. What most likely will happen is that this will settle out of court for a much lower and reasonable asking price, and the streamer will have to agree to never stream themselves playing video games ever again. At least I'm pretty sure Nintendo will probably ask for that stipulation to be added. I think it's sad that a video game company like this that is so beloved around the world is so hostile to people who just want to play the games. And I think it's also sad that a streamer doing this only adds fuel to the fire in Nintendo's favor. All I'm asking is that streamers be a little bit smarter about the way that you play your video games, and maybe not be quite as braggadocious about the fact that you're not paying for them. And to the big game companies out there, including Nintendo, emulation is not taking money out of your pocket. And if you want complete and total irrefutable proof that Nintendo is doing just peachy keen financially, they opened up multiple theme parks. What do you guys think? Do you think this streamer is getting what they deserve? Or do you think that Nintendo is doing what they always do and is trying to just throw their weight around again? Thanks for watching this video, I really appreciate it. If you want to support my channel, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. You can become a member of the channel if that's something you'd like to do, or you can donate to my channel over on my Ko-fi page. Now, I'm gonna go play my bootleg Game Boy that I legally bought from Walmart.